So I went to St. Mary's College of Maryland. I was a political science major. And when I found out that hunting organizations have lobbyists on Capitol Hill, that really was the wedding of my two passions, politics and policy making with hunting and fish and wildlife and outdoor recreation. And so I knew pretty early on that's what I wanted to do. So within a few months of graduating from St. Mary's College, I moved to Washington, D.C. to work and spent almost 20 years there um, working on public policy, working on, as an advocate on Capitol Hill for wildlife conservation. And then somewhere along the way, I got a master's degree from Johns Hopkins that was cum laude, uh, that was in political science as well. So I've got 2 degrees these days. I thought I was going to be in government relations and a lobbyist for my whole career. That's the only thing I ever wanted to do. But when COVID came and we couldn't get back on the Hill and we couldn't really, there was no reason to go to Washington because nobody was there. We were lobbying like this from our dining room tables. It was really kind of, it just wasn't very satisfying. Lobbying is a one-on-one in-person business. And so it was time for a change. And this position came up, and it was, I think I'm uniquely suited for what I'm doing now, working in Easton. And I like to tell people I've traded Washington, D.C. for Washington Street and about an hour and a half commute for a 30-minute commute. And there's nothing like being able to get out and walk around the work you're doing, right? The places that we are protecting, we can get out and walk around and go visit with landowners. It's the policy work on Capitol Hill is very rewarding, but there is nothing as rewarding I found as getting out and talking to landowners on the ground here in the place that I consider one of the best places in the world to live and call home. I grew up in a blue collar household, very blue collar. And when you see something, a job that needs to get done, you go do it. And I saw a town council that had gotten the town into some real serious problems. I think the Liberty Commerce Street we all know now was a boondoggle. It turned out okay from a project standpoint, but it's still a financial burden on the town of Centerville. Somebody should have been paying more attention throughout that process. I knew we had a wastewater treatment plant investment in Centerville that was going to be even more expensive than that major road project. And I thought, serious people have got to run for these jobs because there's serious issues. People that are interested in spending the time getting to learn the ins and outs of these things, and not just posturing about where things ought to be and what they believe in. Some of these things that have to get done just need people to come do them, and that's why I ran. I've got this will be my final term if I am fortunate enough to get reelected to the town council. A second term is plenty for me. 6 years on the council, I can pledge to that for sure. So, we've got some things we'd like to get done. That wastewater plant being the first order of magnitude for sure. But that's why I did it. I think serious people have to commit. It's part of a public service ethos that I have had since I was a young man and an Eagle Scout in Troop 427 in Baltimore. Somebody's got to step up to do these jobs. Sure. So when I ran back in 2020, Dave, I was the only candidate in a field of 9 people who was talking about the town's debt, which at the time was about 3 times the town's annual budget. We had about $17 million in debt and roughly about a $5 million budget. And so I said, if you elect me to the council, I'm going to bird dog this debt issue. And I'm happy to say that we are now, just a scant 3 years later, we have less than $10 million in debt. And that is not because we just made the regular payments by any stretch. That is not the case. I aggressively, working with our town manager and other council members, aggressively committed to paying down that debt much more quickly than it needed to be done by the terms of those loans to get Centerville in better fiscal shape. I don't think a town can carry that kind of debt burden very long. And we have addressed that. I think we've gotten way in front of it. I'd like to continue to do that. And I've got the track record to show that I will continue to do that. The second thing is I want to get this wastewater treatment plant. I want to get ground broken on it. And I want to make sure that we have the funding necessary to make sure we don't have to get that debt right back up to where it was before to pay for this thing. I am fundamentally opposed to the citizens of Centerville that are there now footing the bill for tomorrow's wastewater growth. It's just bad public policy. And so I'm pretty proud of the fact that under this council, we have created a kind of a trust fund or an allocation fund. So if anybody builds a house and connects to our wastewater plant or our sewer system, they pay about $14,000 in allocation fees. The town has got a long history of frittering that money away. We're not doing that anymore. We now keep that funding for investments in the wastewater treatment plant and the wastewater system, which is what it ought to be used for. In the past, it was used to keep utility rates artificially low. And so what happens is when that bill comes due for investment in the wastewater plant or the wastewater system, you don't have anything to do. You don't have any money to use for that like you should have. So we've created that account. We're treating allocation dollars as a trust for the future. But more importantly than getting the wastewater plant built without borrowing any more money is, in my opinion, making sure that project is managed in such a way that utility rates in the town of Centerville don't climb any higher than they already are. One of the things that we hear the most about as town council people is the cost of wastewater and drinking water and utility bills in town. There's not very much we can do about that. The system costs what it costs to operate. I would love nothing more than to reduce utility rates. I think that's an easy thing to say. It is a virtually impossible thing to do, right? To make it really easy, if the system costs $1,000 a year to operate and there are 10 people using the system, they're all going to owe $100. And if you reduce those costs, if you reduce those bills, that money is just going to come from somewhere else on the taxpayer ledger. So it's important for me to keep an eye on how we operationalize this plant, in the future. And a key corollary to that, a key component of that is I want to make sure that when we double the capacity at that wastewater plant from roughly 500,000 gallons a day to 1 million gallons a day, that the growth gates don't just flood open. Right? That is what keeps me up at night as a town councilman, as a resident of Centerville, is I don't want to see an immediate doubling of the town's population just because we have this new capacity. I don't think we should take a use it or lose it approach. I think that's pretty foolish. And if I'm on the council, we're gonna try really hard to enact policies, not just opinions, not just coming out and saying, "Hey, I don't think we should, use it or lose it and give all these allocations away as soon as we can." But let's enact policies to make sure these new allocations are going to the types of developments that we want. And that is creating an allocation policy that is rooted in smart growth. I think rather than just if you apply for them and we've got them, you get them. Let's take a more sensible approach and say, how can we make sure these allocations, which are limited, right? When they're gone, they're gone. How can we make sure they're going to the types of projects that the town wants to see? I think it's just a wastewater allocation policy. And so when a developer comes to town and they want to build, we can say, here's the policy, right? Maybe it's a priority on commercial. Maybe it's a priority on what I would call sort of high employment commercial. So we've created in this comprehensive plan something I had a big hand in, is this technology enterprise district out on Route 304 and 301. And so what we're trying to do is attract a campus style feel to that development. So it's maybe medical offices, technology type offices. Maybe you could create an allocation policy where those types of developments that really meet the needs of the comprehensive plan are first in line. They're going to get priority for those allocations. Otherwise, I think you get sort of your typical development, right? Your typical R1, R2, R3 development, build a lot of houses at questionable density, and and then the allocations are gone.
Yeah.
And in 25 years, or maybe a lot less, maybe 15 years, the town is looking at, we need another wastewater plant again. And I want to try to avoid that for the taxpayers of tomorrow. One of the frustrations that we have started to address, although I think it's kind of a global issue, is this turnover and the inflation of costs. Staff turnover at the town of Centerville, when I got on the council, was very high. It was very high. We could not keep people around. We weren't paying enough money. We just weren't competitive. We could train them here in Centerville, and then they would often go to other towns, other counties to make dramatically more money. And that was frustrating because that required us to spend, there's only one way to solve that problem. You've got to pay people more money if you want them to stay. And, the inflation that we've experienced as a country, as a world, since I have been on this council, certainly municipal government is not exempt from that. And so one of the very frustrating things is the cost of everything we're doing is up dramatically. People understand this in their own lives. Certainly it costs more to do your home improvement jobs. It costs more to buy a car. It costs more to do your weekly grocery shopping. All of that applies to the town of Centerville as well. And it really stresses the town's budget. And I think that's been something that when I got elected, that wasn't the case. There's plenty of money coming from the federal government. There was money coming from the state. And so, now you see the flip side of that coin is costs for everything are up, including our people. Right? They expect to make a living wage. We want to give them that. And in large extent, we have done a number of salary studies. We have got salaries up across the board. And I think Centerville is as close to fully staffed as it has been in a very long time, which is really good. That helps us deliver services. That helps us keep people safe. And it just helps the town work, right? You're not always training somebody new. And that has a real positive impact on the town.
Same question. How do we build community as Centerville grows?
Well, I'll start by plugging my fellow council members, Ashley Kaiser and Eric Johnson, who have really spearheaded First Fridays, every month that it's reasonably nice outside. And that's doing very, very well. And I think people are turning out for that. We have got also a growing and burgeoning farmers market, which has been supported by this town council as well, and has become something of a destination. I mean, when I first moved to Centerville, we didn't have a farmers market to speak of, but even in the last few years, you can see the farmers market really taking off on Sunday mornings, and that's been a great addition. And I would also say, we have got some of the best municipal trails of any municipality in the state of Maryland, certainly on the Eastern Shore. People are coming from other places to walk on our trails, which is fantastic. They're going to our wharf park and enjoying themselves there. The town just this past week had a fishing derby and movie night. And, I think there's a lot happening in Centerville. We've got a lot of people who are commuting. I think they're kind of back to commuting more than ever before because of COVID callbacks, as we call it. But I think there's lots of community in Centerville. I think what the Spy is doing, is really important, as I've mentioned in our public sessions, because Centerville doesn't really have that strong weekly newspaper presence in town anymore. We have the Record Observer, but that I'm not sure what their subscription rates look like, and we need people to really tune into this election. I think they've got three choices for town council. We have differences on some issues. I think there's pretty wide division in our personalities, which probably conveys pretty clearly in these types of settings, and in the way we do business, for sure, the way we carry ourselves. But I think Centerville's got a great sense of community. I think we're on the right track for sure. I think walkability, as we build that into our future developments, It's a priority. Our trails now, our trails master plan, making sure that you can walk from or ride a bike, walk your dog from Northbrook to Symphony Village, Northbrook to the high school. That's the kind of vision we want to implement, and we're doing it. We just in the FY23 budget, we invested in a new addition to the trail system just on the other side of the Millstream Park from where our current trails are. So we're putting our money where our mouth is in terms of community. I think Centerville is alive and well.